Hello, my name's Dr. Gail John and I'm the author of Intergenerational Trauma, ACEs and Educational Inclusion. I would like to talk to you about the connection between language being disabled by the fear response and the dyslexia research, and looking at solutions, some of the things that you can do to process trauma in a safe, effective way. Firstly, the trauma research shows that fear and trauma can disable the language area in the brain, which means that the person who's affected by it will sometimes be rendered speechless. It's not that they cannot speak or they've lost the ability to speak. The person cannot find the right words. There are no words to explain what has happened to them. They are lost. They are rendered speechless. The dyslexia research teaches us about the differences between the left and the right hemispheres in the brain. In 1925, Samuel Orton, a pioneering dyslexia researcher and scientist, put forward the theory that developing readers repress or turn off the visual images from the right hemisphere of the brain because these images inhibit the input from the left hemisphere of the brain. And Orton described the problem of the visual representation of the letters being twisted. He believed that dyslexia was not a perceptual problem or a problem with vision, rather that it was a problem with language, a specific reading disability. And he took the neurobiological position that dyslexia is a disorder related to the brain. Orton in 1937 suggested that the reading disability, that in a considerable proportion of cases there was evidence of difficulty acquiring other functions, disorders in speech, spelling, reading, and a failure to acquire skilled movements with normal ease and accuracy, difficulty in learning foreign languages after English has been mastered. With the advances in science, it has enabled researchers to provide a substantial evidence base for the genetic origin of dyslexia, along with hard, concrete scientific evidence to defend Orton's 1925 theory. Today, the pioneering dyslexia researchers have produced a wealth of evidence connecting neuroscience, epigenetics, brain plasticity, education, and MRI scanning, which has meant that knowledge and understanding about dyslexia and other specific learning difficulties have advanced in ways that only could have been imagined decades ago. Dyslexia is now celebrated and understood as part of neurodiversity, or a learning difference, which is highly comorbid with other neurodivergences such as ADHD, dyspraxia, autism. Tim Miles of Bangor University in 1993 stated that the balance between the two halves of the brain is different in dyslexics. Hornby's research in 1984 put forward the view that in dyslexics' brains more messages had to be passed from one hemisphere to the other, and a traffic jam of nerve signals builds up between the language areas in the opposite sides of the brain, complicating a dyslexic's understanding and expression of verbal and written speech. West in 1991 supported Orton's theory when he pointed out that modern culture was dominated by modes of thought most compatible with the left hemisphere, that our view of the world, our education system, our system of rewards, aspirations, and our value systems are all effectively focused on reinforcing the operation of the left hemisphere. The phonological deficit hypothesis attributes reading difficulties to phonological processing. Goswami et al. 2002 argue that a quarter of those with reading difficulties can be predicted from those with speed-rhythm deficit connected to phonological processing. The magnocellular deficit hypothesis puts forward the view that dyslexia arises because of the impairment in the sensory pathways in vision. Stein, 1989, identified that eye movement and visual tracking difficulties were common in people with dyslexia. Talal, in 1993, found that it is very common for dyslexic children to have specific problems with auditory processing. Nicholson and Fawcett of the University of Sheffield further developed the dyslexia theory about the role of the cerebellum and automaticity. In 1989, the invention of brain imaging brought with it an understanding of the cerebellum's connection to cognition and language. Liner et al. 1989 claimed the two-way connections linking the cerebellum to to Broca's area made it possible to improve language dexterity, which combines motor and mental skills. All the different dyslexia theories have added a deeper understanding that many dyslexics have difficulty in many different areas, such as difficulty with speech language, auditory or visual processing, and motor skills connected to the cerebellum. These theories mutually support the substantial trauma-informed evidence base. The cerebellum theory considers the cerebellum impairment from birth or pre-birth, and this theory, along with others, suggesting that maybe dyslexia and other comorbid neurodifferences could be the consequence of the effects of intergenerational trauma, since it is established that trauma disables the language areas of the brain and can be passed to unborn future generations at a cellular level. Leading trauma researcher Mate, 2019, also pointed out the link between ADHD and trauma with his adoption studies, and according to Lieberman, 2020, if you have ADHD, you will be 76% more likely to have dyslexia. This was cited in the British Dyslexia Handbook 2020. Regarding trauma and dyslexia, Elliott and Nicholson, along with others, have acknowledged that dyslexic people can be easily re-triggered and traumatized when exposed to disabling environments. This is also recognized in the pre-dyslexia screening tests. Elliott and Nicholson, 2016, state that a mismatch between reading readiness, classroom readiness and teaching method leads to consistent and traumatic cognitive and social failure. This leads to chronic levels of stress and anxiety. This stress and anxiety has as catastrophic effects on the learning capacities, basically diverting all brain resources from flexible learning circuits to the fixed fight, flight or freeze systems. Since trauma experts have acknowledged that traumatized individuals can often live predominantly out of the emotional side of the brain and need to stimulate the other logical language side, it is important for dyslexic people, people with ADHD and other neurodivergences, or those who have been traumatized, to learn effective strategies to reduce the stress in their lives.